Last week we drew this whimsical fun fab 3/4 face, and then today I'm going to show you how you can shade it. If you're new to my channel, my name's Campbell. I'm an artist. I have 2 YouTube channels. I actually have one for mixed media and then this new channel which is dedicated just to teaching you how to draw. So last week we drew this from scratch. So if you haven't done that yet and you want to learn how to draw a 3/4 face, I would definitely recommend checking out the links in the description box or the eye in the corner of your screen and go back and watch that first and then come back to me in this video where I'm going to show you how to shade it. Now, I was using a reference just for reference purposes. So I wasn't going for a super realistic look. Rather, I was keeping it in my fun, fab face style. But it is important to use references because they give you a ton of information. So even if you're not making super realistic faces, you can still use the information in a photograph to help you draw better, even if your style is like loose or whimsical or really random. You can still use a photograph to give you so much information, especially when it comes to shading. So for instance, I could use a picture of a man or like this picture, which looks nothing like the picture I was using to draw with, simply to inform where my shading is going to go on my drawing. So it's really important that you use the information in a photograph because it's so easy and it tells you everything that you need to know. So what I'm talking about in this book, and by the way, the real-time lessons I give to all my students at the Fun Fab Drawing Club at Awesome Art School. And enrollment actually opens on September 24th. I only open it once or twice a year. So if you want in, go to awesomeartschool.com when you're done watching this video to get more information. But I'm referencing one of my books, again, How to Draw and Find Your Style, because I'm talking about the value scale and using photographs to inform where the lights and the shadows on your drawings are going to go, rather than trying to come up with this information out of thin air or use your imagination or have an imaginary light source. Dude, life is so easy if you can just use the photographs right in front of you to give you all the information. So I'm using my phone head to demonstrate the lighting that I'm seeing on my photo, which is right there on the left, which is the reference that I use. So again, my style, as you can see, is super whimsical. It's not realistic, but you can still use that information. So let's get started. I'm taking a soft pencil and I'm using the side of it. This is a Blackwing pencil, which is super unnecessary. I just love them, or they're really soft. It's equivalent to about a 4B and it's very soft. So I'm using the side of my pencil, the side of the graphite, to lay down, I call it laying down, a nice light layer of graphite shading just to get the ball rolling. And I know where to go because I'm looking at my photo and I'm seeing where it's really dark on the left side of her face, and that's where I'm starting to apply the graphite. And then again, so where else is it dark? That's what I'm asking myself. Where else is it dark on that photograph? Well, it's dark around her right eye. So again, I'm starting light because you can always add more, but I'm kind of just using almost cross hatching. As you can see, I'm just holding my pencil super lightly and I'm almost scribbling in where it's kind of dark in that photograph. Now, helpful hot tip. It's way easier to work from a black and white photograph than it is to work from a colored photograph, because then sometimes the issue of color gets confused with the issue of value. That's why I published my How to Draw and Find Your Style book in black and white, because I was trying to illustrate over and over and over and teach the value scale and shading and shadow, and it's so much easier to do that if you're working from a black and white picture. It just takes away all the guesswork, and I'm all about the easiest ways to learn how to do art. So easy, fast. I will take that route every single time. So once I have that light layer down on my paper that you saw me using the side of my pencil, I'm taking my blending stump and I'm just mooshing it around. I'm just smoothing it out. So that's all that I'm doing. And I'm also using the side portion of my blending stump in the areas that I want a nice smooth area. And if you notice, I'm not using the super dirty side this time. I'm using the clean side of my blending stump because she's very Caucasian and I don't want super, super, super black areas. Although the shading on the left of her nose is almost black. So it wouldn't be wrong to do that. And as you can see a few times, I've used my eraser to actually pick up the areas that were too dark. Guys, it's graphite. You can erase all day long if you're making something that's incorrect. So I'm using the dirty side of my blending stump to really go in and blacken up the areas that need to be darker. And if something's a little bit too severe, then I'll flip it and I'll use the side of my blending stump that's less black so I don't overdo it. And at this point, I'm doing just like the really subtle shading on her cheek, just using the bare amount of graphite that's left over on my blending stump. And again, you can see the style of drawing is very different than a super realistic style, but that's what I like. I love like just making these whimsical faces that are just fun and joyful. And it takes the pressure off not having to draw realistically. It's like the difference between being serious and just having fun. And this is the way that I prefer to teach my students, especially if we're beginners. I get into realism. I totally teach it. But when you're starting out, it's so much easier. And again, I will always take the easy route to get started because then you're relaxed, you're having fun, you're going to practice more, then you're going to get better just by default. And then you can go on and you move on and you actually end up improving so much when you're starting with this whimsical or fun fab style, like I like to call it. So when the shading is kind of done and you have like a good kind of swath everywhere, I like to go back and kind of punch up some of the lines because what happens is when you're mooshing things around with your blending stump, you're losing a lot of definition, especially if your pencil is as soft as this Blackwing. It kind of melts all across the paper and you lose them. So a great way to punch up your details is to go back and re-add in any details that you might have lost. So I'm using a 14B arteza pencil right here, and to use the whole breadth of your value scale, which is everything from black to white and all the grays in between, having some really specific small areas that are really dark, that contrast between the dark areas and the light areas is where you get your drama when you're drawing. It's really fun. I would much rather overshade something than undershade something because that's where the drama comes from. And it's just frankly fun. And if you're working in graphite, right, you don't have the luxury of adding color and getting creative that way. So I personally like to use shading as my way of being creative and my way of expressing myself and my way of creating these characters from scratch on my paper. So if we're going to be talking about using black, then the only places that I will be using black, and I'm going to do it in just a moment. And here I'm just adding shading to her lips because, they are not white, right? So if you don't have color, you will add graphite and try to, and again, this is where it's so helpful to have a black and white photograph because then you're just trying to match the values of gray. You're just trying to match them to your paper. So it's way easier. And I should have used that for this project, so my apologies. So in the absence of a black and white photo, I'm just kind of making up the darks and lights as I see them on my paper. But again, it's so good to have some parts that are super light and some parts that are super dark. So just doing the best you can. A lot of times you can squint your eyes and that will help you identify which areas are truly dark. Now the area next to her nose is almost black, so I can't remember if I do that or not. But if I do it, it's the right move, right? It really is that dramatic and it really is that dark. So take your time, grab your reference that will be in black and white to help you see the values correctly. And the objective is to use all the values from black to white. So as you'll see, I'm going to add black to her pupils, her nostrils, and just the little line that's like between her lips. Because if you're going to draw any parts that are actually black, then those are the only parts that you can see. But I just like knowing, like ticking off the box. Like, do I have some black in my project? Yes, tick. Oh, and here we go with a black pencil. You'll see right now. I'm just adding, and there's another thing. I just erased out that little highlight above her lip. So that's how you're getting the whites back in. So you can draw with your eraser in the same way that you can draw with a pencil. So if you have areas that are super graphited up, you can remove little spots to try to add the highlights back in. So if you've done the hand exercises with me from my How to Draw Amazing Hands book, that is all about shading and drawing with your eraser. Hands are like nothing but shading. Oh God, it's so hard. But that was a big takeaway from doing these 31 series, 31 lessons of how to draw hands, was I became like a master at shading. So now, and you can remind yourself, like you can draw with an eraser the same way that you can draw with a pencil. So I end up loving her. She looks a little alien-esque, but I was like, oh, her neck is too thin. But again, I'm not going for realism. I like that she's very stylized. And next week on this channel, I'm going to be doing a 3/4 portrait in Copic markers to just give a different effect. So if you want to subscribe, and then join me back here on Monday for another 3/4 portrait.